here tonight, I want to add Callaghan Innovations perspectives to what Olaf just said, add those perspectives on digital lean for manufacturing, especially with a focus on how can we build capabilities for Industry 4.0. And I thought I'm going to ask or look at 3 questions that we're going to go through during those 15 minutes today. First question, quite a big one, why Industry 4.0? Second question, sounds a bit like Tina Turner. What's lean got to do with it? And third question would be, where do we start with that digital lean or Industry 4.0? And so, when we come to Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution, people often start giving you that history lesson of what the other 3 revolutions would have been. And I don't really want to do that today. I want to focus on where we're at right now, which is then obviously somewhere around Industry 3.0, and look at what might be changing if we really go towards Industry 4.0. And a bit of a spoiler alert, similar to what Olaf said in the first talk, it is all about data, and I'd add it's data and networks that make Industry 4.0 really come to life. And then, of course, technologies are playing a big role in that as well. They are kind of the key enabler, and there's a range of technologies that are often labeled as Industry 4.0, and as Olaf pointed out, a lot of those technologies have been around for longer than we even know about Industry 4.0. One of the key technologies, I think, is the Internet of Things, which conceptually consists of 3 layers, where we've got, at the bottom, we've got the things, the physical things that are with us in the physical world. Then we add sensors to them, which allows them to transmit the data, which we connect into the networks, which we then can turn into that data. We can turn that data into decisions. But the big question within the Internet of Things framework is, what about the relationship between those things in the physical world? And the other question, what about the life cycle of things? In other words, where are those things coming from? How are they made? And where are they going to? How are they maybe recycled? And so it's those 2 perspectives that Industry 4.0 or the frameworks of Industry 4.0 are adding to the Internet of Things framework. And if we think back to Industry 3.0, factories really used to be quite hierarchical. So we had the machines, and the machines even had control systems, so it was kind of smart machines. And they would be organized into workstations, and those workstations might be grouped into factory lines, and we'd have the enterprise, kind of the rest of the business, sitting on top of that. And there was data exchange and communication, but typically just between each of those layers. And importantly, the products weren't part of that communication at all. So if we look at what Industry 4.0 is proposing here, is really changing that hierarchy into one connected network, which means the factory becomes a flexible factory, which is connected to the world, which means connected to suppliers, connected to distributors, and importantly, the products are connected as well. And now we can have communication between each of those each of those participants individually. And that might sound like a really big thing that only big corporates are going to invest in. But actually, it's not far from here, a company called Masoud, focusing on hot runner systems. They had the situation that financial data was suggesting that they should be able to make some improvements in their productivity, but they realized, well, they wouldn't have data to realize where to start even. And so what they did basically was keeping their old equipment, or their proven equipment, and adding sensors to them, and basically collecting that data from those sensors into a dashboard, which then at one central point basically tells them at any point in time how production is going, where bottlenecks are emerging, and so they can make decisions about production timely and where they are needed. The second thing, besides those hierarchies, is in terms of the product life cycle and product value chains, as Olaf pointed out, these days, or in Industry 3.0 in particular, can be quite long, and they are quite linear as well. And so you start designing, then you produce it, you deliver it to the customer, and then the customer uses it and eventually disposes the product. Maybe you had some customer service in between. And it's essentially a sequence of value-added steps in a waterfall structure. So you design first, then you hand it over to production, and so on. And the real goal is optimizing that speed to market, so shortening the product value chain. Instead, what Industry 4.0 is proposing is to create that value network where we have multiple connections between the different stages, which essentially means we're creating that value network. It is much more iterative and agile, so we'll have designs, and we keep improving on those designs. And the key is not necessarily shortening the chain, but really optimizing for the value. And what that means in particular is Industry 4.0 is creating new business models or new types of business models. One of them being product as a service or equipment as a service, which means you're not necessarily buying your machines on the manufacturing shop floor anymore, but you're basically buying the service that machine is delivering. So you pay per part rather than having to front up that capital expenditure. A second type of business model is really that user-driven and customization business model, which where 3D printing, of course, plays a huge role in enabling that. And one company that has done really well in experimenting all sorts of things in that space is Additive, which isn't kind of the high-tech company that you might think of Industry 4.0 refers to. But they've rolled out over the last 4 years concepts like a speed factory, which would reduce the speed to market basically from what used to be 15 months into 1 week, from design to the finished shoe. Now you might ask, when will we get one of those speed factories in New Zealand? Well, they've shut down the ones that they had. But in the process, they've learned so much about their materials and about their manufacturing processes that they are on to the next experiments. And for example, now using sustainable materials or using plastic from the oceans into making sports shoes. The third kind of business model is platform models. And again, 3D printing is coming our way. 3D hubs is one of those models where the proposition was that basically anybody who has a 3D printer can become a manufacturer through being connected through that platform. Now they've pivoted slightly and have realized that not everybody who has a 3D printer is a manufacturer, but still they've got, I think, 240-ish manufacturing locations around the world, and you order your part and you get it from one of those. The second question, remember Tina Turner, what's lean got to do with it? The common element here, I think, is really that focus on the value that is really critical in lean, that we are distinguishing between what are value-adding activities, where's the waste happening. And researchers have analyzed how Toyota has done things, and they came up with those 14 principles, for example, that can be grouped into those 4 categories. Often we think of lean as really those process tools, but it's important to stress that the other dimensions, the philosophy behind it, that longer-term thinking, as well as the people focus, and even how you approach problem solving is equally important if you want to be successful in lean. And I'd say that applies to Industry 4.0 as well. One of the techniques that is being used is what's called value stream mapping. And it is basically consists of 2 parts, which is analyzing the material flows and value is associated with making transformations of that material along the chain, basically. And the other part is information flow. And what we basically can say here, if we think about Industry 4.0, it's obviously the amount of data that we have, the amount of information will increase. So that's where we're going to see the big change, basically, in terms of what lean even looks like if we apply it to an Industry 4.0 concept. One of the sort of approaches, if you take really embrace lean as a company, is that idea of Kaizen, where you make those the series of small steps of improvements that over time will give you that big impact. If we think about Industry 4.0, that's probably not quite how we can get there, because what is asked from us is to embrace those new technologies, and that probably will lead to a different kind of lean, which is less known, which is called Kaikaku, which is giving really those step changes. But the flip side of that is those step changes are not going to come from the people on the shop floor that are embracing the lean and the Kaizen approach, but it has to be the leaders in the business that are embracing the Kaikaku approach and therefore leading the charge on the Industry 4 strategy that the company has. If we think about what really makes a company successful and what could give leaders an idea of where they start with their journey, I want to refer to Göran Roos, who hopefully many of you would have come across at some point. And he, in a podcast with Hera last September, basically described the sources of competitive advantage really being having something that nobody else has, being able to use that something more than once, and then last but not least, it should be relevant to your strategy, and you also should be able to kind of protect that so that others can't easily copy what you're doing. And when you think about what sort of fulfills these three premises, it is brands, processes, systems, and people with unique capabilities. So for the last question, in terms of where do you start, I really want to look at those capabilities. And the concept of capabilities is quite interesting because it's quite an abstract one, but it is basically describing what the company does in order to deliver value to its customers. It's not how we do it, but it's what we do. And the good thing about that what is, it doesn't change so often over time. The how we do it might change, but the what doesn't. In order to make that what a reality, of course, we need the people. So we need a who element. We need a process around it, which then is talking about the how. We need information, and we need technology. And it's around that people, process, and information element where we've kind of seen the lean journey lead us to. And it is that information and technology element that the Industry 4 basically is adding to that spectrum. And as a company, if you're doing that well, then you're not only delivering customer value, but you're hopefully also achieving your business goals. And those business goals should then define key metrics, which will allow you to measure your capabilities against. So in other words, what is asked from us if we're looking to start that Industry 4 journey is developing our capabilities towards Industry 4, and we should do that in a way that we can measure whether we're on the right track or not. And so to summarize, I'd like to propose the answers to the three questions. So why Industry 4.0? It is to unlock that flexible production network and allow those new product value networks to happen. What's lean got to do with it? Well, it is that clear focus on the value and as opposed to the waste that lean is trying to reduce. And where to start? We think a good way of starting is really getting clarity in the business, what it is you're trying to do and how you're adding value to your customers. Identify those capabilities and look at how you can develop them. And if you are interested in that, I've got 20 minutes left to plug like an ad. 20 seconds, sorry. We've just launched a program which is called Digital Lean at Callaghan Innovation. So if anybody in the room is interested in talking to me about it, please do so afterwards. Thank you very much.